We're live from State Control Britain, and I've got a British Bulldog with me today, Jonathan. Hi, Jonathan.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, and we've got on the screen, obviously, the FDA's food guidelines, which I don't know if Jonathan's noticed, but I've made a golden triangle. It's a triangle within a triangle, and I think the top left-hand corner, that's what we should be looking at. What did you think of it, Jonathan, the new guidelines?
When it came out, I honestly thought it was like fake news that some carnivore pages put out. I was thinking in my head, oh no, this isn't real. Then obviously like the news about RFK coming into the public eye more. I was like, oh, that is actually a thing. So I was like Googling it, as ChatGPTing it. Is this actually real? Is this a thing, or is this like fake news? Then you obviously made the video, you put up things, information resources online to read and look through. Other people have done the same. So yeah, either we've all been duped or it's actually a thing. Then I read heard a news video recently, or like a little clip of some American guy. I don't know, American politics or anything, but American guy standing next to some other health ministers over there, I imagine. This is what we're looking to do. Saturated fat is good and proteins are good. We're going to go into a really interesting, very, very, very actually interesting talk today, a little bit about this as we sort of interlude into it. And we'll kind of discuss what you pointed out, which I think was very interesting just before we went live. So if you want to continue and bring that up, maybe.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, I must think you're alluding to the fact that the sums don't add up. So, for instance, there's a 10% cap. Interestingly, you're in the chat, by the way, Jonathan, which is great. Yeah, there's a 10% cap on the saturated fat. So if you then use the guidelines to eat enough animal proteins, you can't do that without exceeding the 10% cap. And there's little bits like that where if you do get into the maths, it doesn't really work. I mean, they are guidelines. And I think those little flaws I'm going to forgive, because I'm the same as you, mate. As soon as I saw it, I thought, well, this is, which is why I did the live stream yesterday. It's a step in the right direction. And, who would have thought you would see steak, cheese, salmon, ground beef, full fat milk, eggs, prawns, tinned fish, chicken in the top left-hand corner there. And I think we, as I said yesterday, we do tend to look at things from left to right. So I'm literally thinking that's the golden triangle, personally.
Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, sorry, just from a point of view, if I go back in time to say maybe when my grandmother was a child, she's about 94 now. Mm-hmm. If you kind of look at as a whole, it's basically what she would have eaten. There's some things in there which we 60 years ago, we didn't have avocados. We didn't have a few of the items on there, but broadly speaking, yeah, she was eating green beans. She was eating peas, carrots, cabbage, a few fruits, maybe not some of the exotic ones. I remember when she's saying to me how when easy peelers first came about, that was like a whole massive thing and everyone loved it. But broadly speaking, it's pretty good. But yeah, I mean, there's room for improvement. And I actually did my dissertation when I did my degree in human nutrition on public health guidelines. So I actually did it on what the UK had, an Eat Well plate, I think it's called. And there's lots of sort of contention about, did people really follow the diet or did they not? And my question was something along the lines of, do the general public or gym users understand the food guidelines better? So was it the gym goers or the average person, average Joe, that understood what all the good guidelines were? So did they know 6 to 8 glasses of water? Did they know 40 grams of fiber? Did they know this much fish each day? Did they know this many fruit and vegetables? They got some of the key ones right, but a lot of them just slipped past the point of view, like the understanding from the general public. But they, from my understanding, people know what they are. So I mean, nowadays people are going to have a much better health status, I think, if they sort of start applying these things. Because I mean, if you go back and look, think, oh, you should be eating this. Well, it just gets a bit dull, doesn't it? I mean, I can probably speak for a lot of carnivores out there. I don't go about my day and think, oh, I'm really missing out carrots or bread or bananas. Obviously, I'm about 6 years carnivore, and Stephen's been carnivore even longer than me. But now we don't miss those things at all. But for a lot of people, they might start to miss it. But now we've got these high protein animal foods in the scene in the guidelines. It's should be quite interesting. But what I'm most interested in is how this will impact food legislation and food guidance over here. So I looked at different places around the world, like Japan, for example, Norway, Sweden, I think Australia, Canada. They've all got their own gist of something to do with the food guideline. And back roughly 10 years ago, the best one that I saw was actually the Japanese. And yes, it was high in starches, but they did have a very strong focus on, fatty meat as well. So it's not too bad. But I think actually this is probably the best food guidelines in the world right now. We're talking about what matches what we sort of most strongly believe in terms of like a carnivore or animal food way of eating.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things I wanted to also point out to many people that don't really think these things through, we're talking about saving the planet, for instance. If I looked at the golden triangle, if I put my mouse on there, so that steak, right, the food miles for the steak, just hear me out on this one, Jonathan. Literally, I can look out of my window and see where the cows are. I've been to Cheddar Gorge, where the cheese comes from. Salmon comes from Scotland, which I can get to quite easily, the wild salmon. Eggs, chickens up the road. Ground beef, just said, cows up the road. Chickens, just up the road. Milk, just up the road. And yet when you look on the other side, if you look at bananas basically, obviously tropical regions, you're looking at, 4,500 miles, just the bananas. The grapes are going to be, quite a long way away. We're talking maybe Spain and Italy. So, not too far, but still 600 miles. If we look at oranges, I think that would be, again, Spain, Egypt. So let's say 1,000 miles. So, and avocados, of course, killing lots of bees at the same time, like billions, literally millions and millions of bees. And that's like 5,000 miles. So the food miles on this side do not save the planet. Not at all, So I think that's another thing. But I like what you were saying there. Let's just welcome a few people into the room. So feral grandmother or grandma, hello. Big supporter of your channel, I think, actually, Jonathan. Stephen Foster, hi from Lancashire. Good to see you again. You were on earlier. It looks very pretty, says Lorraine. Yes, it does. It does look good. Hey, Jonathan. Hi, Stephen. Even folks from Joss Sleep and Slim Down Journey. Oh, excellent.
That's exactly Joe. Yeah.
Yeah, right. South Africa, talk about food miles. We've got viewer miles there. Goret, Texia. Oh boy, I'm murdering people's names. I'm sorry about that. Coach Casey, hello. That's good. And yet Joe again. I'm happy to live in the Golden Triangle. Those foods look so tempting. Yeah, exactly. And here's a question, and I tell you, this is why you're on, mate, Jonathan, because you're the same as me. You're a big fan of Harry Sopranos. Should dairy be in the Golden Triangle? What do you think?
I won't be able to sort of emulate Harry's sort of response. We haven't got all of the next week, 2 hours. Yeah. I would say, providing it's dairy in the form that it's shown in the screen, being a bottle of whole milk. Yeah, for a lot of people. I know Harry always talks about, there's a percentage of people that have certain specific calcium related genes, which means they might have a higher requirement of calcium in order to feel better. I'm one of those people with pastoral genetics, often in the northern hemisphere, perhaps people from the Scandinavian region ancestrally. But what that basically means is, throughout history, we would have all had a heritage or a line of people that would have typically consumed certain foods. Now, those foods will be built into their diet, generation after generation after generation. Therefore, they begin to actually require them as part of their diet. Now, when people started to not have those foods, that's when things start to get a bit wrong. When our epigenetic shift, our expressions of how we deal with different foods and tolerances begin to change. So, for example, someone like myself, I don't thrive on a lion diet at all. I get heart palpitations, anxious. I imagine my blood glucose levels go a bit skew if, and that's related to the calcium factor within dairy. Now, obviously, we can get calcium from different foods such as like sardines, bones, broths, things like that. The reality is, for someone my body weight, my sort of stature, it's going to be a lot of sardines to get that much calcium in. And I've actually looked at these specific amounts, and I can give you guys a pretty firm average of what I take in each day into the calcium. Now, these sort of things aren't exact, they're not absolute. Our requirements do change all the time. Just looking through my sort of notes, in the average given day, I'm probably consuming something like about 1,000 milligrams or 1 gram of calcium per day. That's just looking through my app sort of thing. Now, I've tried it different ways, like a carnivore diet with, you know, zero calcium near enough or very close to it with just a lion diet. I lasted about 4 days. I've tried it at about 500-600. Now, there's always a line with these things. It's not like I require more calcium, therefore I can eat unlimited amounts of calcium. Of course, as adults, we don't produce massive amounts of the lactase enzyme as we develop and get older. But some of us do have that ability still to produce a large amount. So it's not like I'm saying, you know, I require all the calcium. There's an amount that I do require, which is typically more than most people, I'd say. But what's your take on this, Stephen? Because you've got a lot of experience in terms of like blood work, people on different diets, people all over the world, just like me. But what's your take on the whole dairy situation?
Well, I'm with you very much in that it is very individualized, and some people absolutely thrive when they take dairy out completely. So I would use Jane, my wife, as an example, and it was even a small amount. And I think that was one of the reasons why I started to want to talk to people about dairy a bit more, because she stopped tea because of the fluoride in tea. And so that's only a splash of milk every time she had a cup of tea, maybe 4 times a day. Well, she took the tea out of her diet, and serendipitously, that meant that the milk came out. And she didn't really need to lose any body fat, but she lost 5 pounds in a few weeks. But all of the remaining sort of mucus and the feeling of being blocked up in her nose completely went. Absolutely. It was incredible. And then we went out for coffee. So, as you know, the reason I think we both like Harry is we both like intervention experiments. And obviously it's an N equals 1, and it could be a coincidence, but it's unlikely, because as soon as she had some dairy, we went out for coffee. It was, you know, New Year's Eve, and we were both pushing the boat out. So for us, that was having a coffee. Well, the next day we really paid for it. So, she did, particularly because the nasal problems came back, and then we've since done that again, a couple of days without any dairy, then put a little bit back in, tiny bit. But I think the pastoral genes thing, I think there's a lot of credibility to that, without a shadow of a doubt. And like you say, we've both had a lot of clients over the time we've been doing this. And yeah, I would say Harry's stats, sort of, it's a rough approximation. I would say maybe 20% of the people I deal with do much, much better without dairy. But then there's nuance to that as well, because I would definitely say that some people that don't do well on dairy may have, you know, not tried raw, may have not tried A2. So I think there's so much more to it. But if we just go broad strokes and talk about the general population and not people like ourselves that are trying to, you know, be as optimal as possible, for the broad person, just a full fat yogurt as a recommendation is just amazingly good. And whole milk, it's so much better than the yogurt with the, you know, the chemical, I've called it in my Substack today, you know, a chemical cascade and sugars and fruit at the bottom and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction, which was the most common, if I was to sort of try and summarize every comment I got, it's a step in the right direction. It's not perfect, but it is so much better. The point that you thought maybe this is even a joke shows that, yeah, it's pretty good. So I'm not going to knock it too much. Let's get into a few people just saying hello to you. So Nicole Rents, hey Jonathan. Let's have a look at this. The feral grandma, they have to make it pretty to get illiterate people to look at it. I actually agree with you. I think as food pyramids go, it is very appealing, and it's a sort of thing that I could knock up, and I might actually have a go at doing a carnivore one. Not all Joes are average, right? Okay, fair enough. Your average Joe, yeah, I get it. Good joke. Lorraine, I freak out when I see bananas, more sugar than the guidelines said. That's a great point, isn't it? Straight away. You see, this is it. There's all these little inconsistencies. I mean, I would never touch a banana. I was born and raised in the UK, so it was my family for a long period of time. I'd never have eaten a banana naturally. And if they've flown 3,000 miles, that's on a good day, so I like to save the planet as well. So Polish Mike is saying most people don't even know what the guidelines were, so they won't even notice that we have new ones. That is good. That's a good comment. I'll just say my little bit, then I'll open up to Jonathan as well, because you say that, but they will notice the impact of it. That's the thing. So I never knew, in my ignorance, when I was younger, that there was all these really prescriptive food guidelines, but I did notice that I was constantly being told, you need to eat your grains, you need to eat your 5 a day. These things all come from food guidelines, so you might not actually know them directly, as in there's a PDF that's come out from the FDA. I agree with that, but the implication of having food guidelines just permeates throughout society. And this is something I don't talk about much. Is I've also got an honours degree in English, and I used to volunteer at a school to help children read, because I do a lot of work with charity and all that stuff. But no, I just wanted to help people. And I sat in on a lesson where they were doing the Eat Well plate. Now the teacher was, very big, and that is an understatement. And I was gobsmacked at what they were saying. I was absolutely gobsmacked at these kids are all having their mind molded. This was a long, long time ago, and wasn't very good. So, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, Stephen, I'd say that's pretty accurate, to be honest. In my findings, my cohort in my study, for what it's worth, at university was about 300 people. So 150 gym users, 150 general public. What I did notice was that there are some things which are absolute standouts. So 6 to 8 cups of or glass of water per day was one that most people knew. The 5 fruit and veg per day was another one. But in terms of the fiber intake, people didn't know about, which is perhaps actually a good thing. Then there's also the fact that a lot of the people that I knew didn't actually prescribe or kind of follow the guidelines themselves. So they had an idea of what they were, but whether or not they follow it's a completely different thing. So all we have to go by, as much as we hate it, is these crappy survey datas and what did you eat last Sunday at 4 o'clock for lunch and dinner and this and that, and how many glasses of milk did you have a fortnight ago, and did you have that, but the context isn't that specific. It wasn't like I had a beef burger in a bun with processed cheese with a fried egg that's fried in seed oils, so it's very much mixed bag, and I think we're always going to have that limitation in terms of our food intake. So I think, imagine maybe 100 years down the line, or at some point down the line, there might be something where we have a sensor in our fridge, and that'd be like, oh, you've just taken out an egg. Oh, this week you've taken out 2 pieces of broccoli, or whatever it is. That's probably the only way we're going to know exactly what we're eating, because these food frequency questionnaires, these surveys, I mean, people can be up to 40% incorrect. That's what they find, and they can typically under predict how much, or under evaluate or dictate how much is actually consumed in a given period of time. But everyone's going to know in their head, I think, I had a McDonald's or a KFC last Friday, because you remember it's a thing. It's maybe it might be a family tradition. You're gonna know that because it's like a staple. You're not gonna know how many eggs you had, over a 2-week span. You're not gonna know how many glasses of fruit juice you had. It's not an exact science. So that's one limitation we'll always have. But I mean, it's like I said, it's a step in the right direction, and there's room for improvement. But at least it kind of justifies our cause as people that are educators in our space online. So when people come to us and I mean, we're in a continuous echo chamber, but I get out the house very occasionally. I chat to people in the sauna and at the gym. And when they next say to me, oh, you shouldn't have that much saturated fat, shouldn't have that much red meat, well, I can say, well, actually, what it's worth, the food guidelines in the US have just changed. This is what they are. And the top left of the pyramid, which constitutes around about a third of what's on a pyramid, says we should be eating all of those things and the whole milk and the full fat variations and not the low fat versions. So it's like I said, it's an improvement. At least it justifies what we're saying. So we're no longer in this position where we're on the back foot having to prove what we've done, despite our numerous anecdotes and thousands and probably millions of testimonies online. So yeah.
Brilliant point. And he's saying, have you looked at this on the website? Apparently, when you open it on there, it comes up slowly with meat first, followed by fats, etc. Interesting, sort of kilts. I think that would only probably happen if you've got a slow connection, to be frank. But yeah, I think it's quite an amusing thing. If it's like the old days when you had a modem and the pictures came in slowly, if the steak, cheese, and the chicken may come in. But that's pretty good. Doses of Shani. Hello, first time here. Welcome. I hope you enjoy it. It's just a very laid back chat today. You can ask questions, but people don't seem a bit shy today. That's okay. Hello from Snowy Maine. That's from Marla. And Alcavor. What great name. Alcavor. I wonder what do you know who that is? Hello, Stephen and Jonathan. No?
I recognise the name, but I'm not sure. But Alcavor, if you can put in the chat what your it might be that his name's like Alkington or something. I don't know, but
yes,
if you can put in the chat what it's related to. So yeah.
I like it though. Who we got here? We've got Kimberly. Have you seen my friend Kimberly? Yeah, Kimberly. Hello, Jonathan and Stephen and everyone. Yeah, that's good. Let's have a look. This is WD25A. WD. I thought it was going to be WD40 when I started to read it, which stands for wet and dry, by the way. And it was the 40th mixture of ingredients that they arrived at. A little bit of trivia for you. Anyway, I fully expect institutions to completely ignore these new guidelines, present their own options, more like existing carb-heavy guidelines. Yeah, I think that is possible. These guidelines have no mandatory power, but I think, I think you might be right, but I'm hopeful that possibly it will cause some changes. Do you have any opinions on that?
If I'm honest, they're so entrenched nowadays. A lot of the institutions that I know about, so like for example, the Association for Nutrition in the UK, you actually have to pay a membership to join, even if you've qualified. It's like £150 a month, a year, or something. I suspect they'll still be in the old loop, the old variation of an eat well guidelines or food guidelines. But like I said, it's going to be so tricky to get people to catch up. The fact that, like Polish Mike alluded to earlier in the chat, is saying how people didn't know what they were and they probably weren't following it anyway. It's like, well, yeah, is this going to be dramatic enough of a shift that they're going to take notice? That's the biggest question. So,
my name is Alan. Alka is a combination of me and my wife's first two letters of our names. Nothing to do with alkaline. That's what I was trying to guess. And a dismal failure. So there's a couple of questions for you, Jonathan. So I'm going to go through the nice comments and we'll get to the questions. So I'm going to just very quickly go through, because I think as you bothered to turn up and type, it would be nice to just acknowledge all that. So let's have a look very quickly. Feral Grandma Iron, I've only seen the whole image. I hope I can find the slower opening one. It's a big new, definitely know this name. Hi folks, hit the like button. That's really good. I always need that reminder. I don't like saying smash the like button. Just click it. Just click the like button and make sure you're subscribed and you get the notifications, because so many people get unsubscribed and have their notifications switched off. Not deliberately, it just happens in the background. Phil Greeley, a great supporter of all that we're doing. WD25 is saying, I was enjoying Stephen's vanilla egg fatty latte, but my acid reflux gone immediately on Carnivore, came back. It might be the vanilla. You're very true. It might be. I finally paid. I really paid for that. Shame. Nearly 17 months free before that. Well, yeah. And this is what we were saying. There's going to be an ingredient there that it's not doing well for you. And it could be the butter, which is dairy. It could be the eggs, egg yolks, by the way. Yeah. And this is why I always have reluctance to put things out, because, as I was saying to you, Jonathan, some people thrive on one thing and others don't. And it's a good replacement for coffee. It can get people off coffee, but if you're not good with dairy or you're not good with eggs, then the fatty latte isn't the way to go. I do apologize for that. Joe is, thanks for the reminder. Yes, thank you. Yes, for the hitting the like button. So I think we've mentioned everybody that beautiful colored. Hi, Jonathan and chat. So that's another one of your followers, I think, Jonathan, which is good. Yeah, let's get to a question then. I think someone's saying this about you, that you're knowledgeable, isn't he? Really pleased to have found his channel. That's good. Well, he is knowledgeable, yes. So let's get to the questions, because this is your street. This is your expertise. You know a lot. You know a lot about supplements and physiology, but I think this is your thing. So Steve Foster is asking, does high intensity interval training, taking your heart rate repeatedly to near maximum, cause damage to blood vessels? Can you hear me?
This is a good question, and I'm going to give a Bart K answer.
Go on.
Hello?
Yeah, go on.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you,
yeah. Brilliant. So I'm going to give a bit of a Bart K answer. So the body's adaptive. So as you train, you build up your resilience, your heart will grow in order to facilitate the blood flow that you need to perform the task or work at hand. So what you typically find is with athletes, the heart will be bigger. The problem that people have is the left ventricular hypertrophy. So that's when the first part of your heart too big, the wall's too big, and it can pump, which causes too much pressure to come through the heart, basically, in a very simplistic terms. Now, what athletes typically find is that they'll have a larger heart than the standard people that are going about the streets. The problem is when they stop exercising. Now they're left with a higher than average size, or greater than average size heart. But their body isn't still required to do that work. Now, in regards to the blood vessels, they are there is plasticity in a sense, so they can expand, increase their, volume, their length in capillary sort of size, things like that. So they can be adaptive, but people begin to have issues when it's beyond what their body's recoverable state is. So, for example, someone like me, if I was to go to the gym, say 3 times per week and train with high intensity training, I'll be fine as I am right now, because that's what I currently do. Now, if I suddenly went to 6 times per week, my body isn't equipped or adapted to tolerate that kind of stress, because I've not built up that physical tolerance to it in terms of my whole unique biology. And that's when you can start to have issues. But like I said, the body is very adaptive, but the question is, how quick can your body adapt from it? What will usually happen is your body will give you plenty of warning signs prior to you having some imminent level of damage. So what you find is you can't recover anymore, you're tired, and that's just an example of where your body's going to show to you, it's going to give you a signal saying, I can't do this anymore, I need to rest, recover, do something else. So I don't think it's necessarily bad as long as you structure or transition up your training volume, intensity, frequency, whatever it is. But also you have to scale down. So for example, the worst thing I could do if I was about to have a surgery is to go to the gym 20 times in a week. If I know that for the next 2 weeks, I'm not going to be in the gym. So my body is going to start to create that adaptation process, but it's not going to continue on. So now I've got a larger, well, it takes a bit of time, but I've got a larger heart, but then my body can't actually facilitate the ongoing process of dealing with that enlarged heart. I speak mainly about heart here because, like I said, the blood vessels are quite plastic, you know. But the heart, once it's big, it does take a long time to decrease in size. So that's when things like taurine can come into play. So it's also an antioxidant for the heart as well. Helps with osmotic pressure, regulating blood pressure as well. So that's why an animal food-based diet can be more helpful in this kind of instance. I noticed the talking as well about high intensity interval training specifically. What I'd probably suggest in that instance is if it's cardio specific in terms of like aerobic exercise, I guess you might say. There's some issues with that kind of nomenclature and terminology. You know, you have to make sure you warm up to it. So don't go to the gym, then all of a sudden start, you know, running on the treadmill because I don't know, Dr. Sean O'Mara said sprints is good for you. So any intervention you do in the gym should be gradually phased up and phased down, depending on what your training period is. Also make sure your goals and objectives are attainable, and also kind of relevant to what you want to achieve. And the goal isn't so much, unless you're an athlete that requires this level of intensity or frequency to perform a given sport, you don't necessarily have to do this much. So, for example, if you're training for a marathon, you should be training for that marathon. You shouldn't be doing 40 miles in a day. You should be doing 26.2, whatever it is, in a day. You know, so it's just about being sensible. It's about doing what your body needs to do to fulfill the task at hand, and that's why individual exercise prescription is so specific. You know, and I know Stephen and I work with a lot of different athletes and people with various different goals. We don't throw people in the deep end. We give them something they can chew on first. Then over time, they might require more. They might also require less. So you should be conservative with your approach. And that's what my opinion is. But what do you think, Stephen?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely on the same page. I sort of sum it up as we want the minimum effective dose, not the maximum you can tolerate. So your point about a race of a certain distance is a minimum effective dose, is running to that, not the maximum you can tolerate, because you wouldn't get to the end of it and go, well, that's great, you can do another 10 miles. There's no point in doing that. So if you think of how medications, and sometimes I use this analogy in other things, medications keep upping the dose until it works. Okay, and so they sort of get the maximum dose, but then they overdose it. They go further to see what would happen, because you may get some magic additional effect. And I think that's the way with training. When you look at it, you definitely get, you know, when you do extreme endurance training, you get cardiac remodeling. That definitely happens. Whether that's a good or a bad thing depends on all those things that Jonathan mentioned. Are you metabolically healthy? Are you letting yourself recover? Are you, you know, eating enough? Are you using the correct hydration, which isn't drinking loads of water? It's having mineral water of some description, whether you add minerals or whether you just go for mineral water with a little bit of salt. However you do it, it's all about joined up thinking. And your physiological edge, you have to get there to get a training response, but you also have to recover. And I would say in nutrition, my biggest bind is people under eating, and in training, it's overtraining. So it's really strange what we do. And maybe that buys in, just trying to loop it back and maybe a callback. Maybe it's endemic that eat less, move more. Even if you're not following it, that's what you're doing. You're following it. You're thinking, right, I want to lose weight, so I'm not going to eat enough, and I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do more than I should. And I mean, I just thought of that off the top of my head. But I think there could be a quite good Substack in that, so I'll make a note of that. Right, now, brilliant answer. And of course, Jonathan, I think you have an ebook about bodybuilding and stuff. Do you want to just quickly tell people what you could do for them?
Yeah, so I actually created an ebook about 2 years ago. It took about a year and a half probably to write, and it's just called Beef Up Carnivore Bodybuilding Bible. It's 170 pages. There's a few references throughout. Some of it is anecdotal, but a lot of it is based on hard science that we do know. Basically teaches you how to go through to create a training plan, a diet plan, things you should worry about in terms of like your body composition. So how to track macros, all this sort of stuff. But there's also some segments in there where you can sort of work out how much cardio specific or aerobic specific workouts you should be doing. And I think the most important thing of all is what you just said, Stephen, which is, do what you have to do to get the job done, but no more. And that's hard. It's a hard task for people to understand. And what we know about body composition in terms of like training, reaching our goals, is a lot of it is based around our diet. Perhaps 80-85% of what we do in the kitchen is perhaps what makes the biggest difference. And people want to get, it's almost like people want to make that 15-20%, 100% of it, but they'll forget about the diet side of it. So there is a lot of talk in that book about diet, maybe like 80 pages, just all related to carnivore specific nutrition. But I do recommend people look at that and check that out. My next ebook coming out shortly, just a quick little note, maybe 1 to 2 months away, will be on how to sort of work out, track your nutrient intake, what things to look out for, how to sort of troubleshoot problems. And it's not going to be on these ebooks which says you should eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, because anyone can tell you that. Everyone says the same thing.
I say that, yes.
there's nothing wrong with giving that guideline, because that's what the literature
Yes.
it's an overarching statement, but the literature does say pretty much that. There's always people either side of that, which it might not always include. I'm one of those people that just needs more protein than other people, and it's a whole conversation. I mean, I could be here for hours, but let's get to the next question, so I don't take up too much time.
To the next question, but I just want to say, don't worry, I didn't take that as an insult, because I think you've got to start somewhere as a rule of thumb. But I think too many people think it is the thing, and I think I do actually make that quite clear. You start off with a ratio of 1-to-1 fat and protein, and roughly 1 gram per pound of lean body mass that you want, the weight you want to weigh. But then it's trial and error, because you could start that and realize you're undereating, and most people undereat. I'm sad to say you want to get away from that, but the next question is sort of around this, so we might as well do it. It's the average Joe again. What is more important? How many grams of protein, stroke macros, etc., or calories? Or is there something else? I think they know the answer.
Yeah, it's a solid question. Polish Mike, he's in the chat right now. He's been a long-term follower of mine, so he knows exactly what I sort of typically preach to people. Ideally, in the best case scenario, you just track the food that you eat. I.e., in one day, you might eat 6 eggs, 2 chicken drumsticks, 3 rashers of bacon, and I don't know, 5 lamb chops or something, whatever it is, and a glass of milk. You know that 1 glass of milk is 1 glass of milk. This many eggs is this many eggs. Now, what we do as human beings, we like to put things into categories, into numbers, slot them into little segments, ratios, percentages, all this sort of thing. And that's where we start to go wrong. So we have an obvious metric being 100 grams of chicken thigh. Then we detract from that and we put a different number on it, even though that number could be different depending on what we do in terms of the cooking. The nutrition profile of it could be different, whether it's from grass-fed, organic, pasture-raised, all this stuff. It can all change the fatty acid composition. So what we look at first is the food grams. That's the best case scenario, and try and do the same sort of thing every day. So it might be the fact that you say, I'm going to have 3 meals per day, and each meal is going to have a fist worth of protein. Your fist isn't going to change size, guys. It's a way of sustainably and repeatably doing about the same sort of thing without getting a food scale out. Now, if you're bodybuilding specific, you want more accuracy, you can say, okay, well, I know that I eat chicken breast 3 times a day or 2 times a day, and this much bacon, this many eggs, or whatever it happens to be. And okay, the average amount in each food contains X protein and Y fat. That's quite a repeatable way of working it out. Then if you cook the food the same way, the fat that renders off is going to be the same amount. Yeah, you can work out pretty closely how much protein you take in. Then even further away from that, you've got obviously the ratio side of things, or the calories, I guess. Calories is a measurement of heat. It's used as a way to sort of work out how much energy was produced to raise, I don't know, was it 1 milliliter of water by 1 degree Celsius?
That's it.
In a steam engine, something like that. So you've got another detraction. And Stephen's probably one of the best people to talk to about metrics and numbers and things, because that's what he deals with all day, with blood tests, phlebotomy, things like that. So we, like I said at the start, we have all these different ways of tracking and measuring things, but what we know is 100 grams of chicken breast is 100 grams of chicken breast, guys. And now the other thing, outside of loosely what you alluded to earlier about the general guideline, like this, what you start with in terms of like protein. Yeah, 1-to-1 protein to fat is a very good idea for a lot of people to start with. A lot of people will probably end up something similar to that. So that might mean 150 grams of protein, 150 grams of fat. Now, what you have to think of is them being isolated nutrients with different purposes. Now, there is an energy value that each one contains, but you're never really going to get it. And now this can be seen in people that have said, I've dropped this much body fat by doing, I don't know, fasting and feasting or priming, or I've done protein sparing modified fast. People have different outcomes based on the sort of protocol they take and the approach. But you got to remember, the goal isn't to fulfill a certain quotient or ratio or percentage of certain macros. The goal is to find the amount which gives you the results you need. Now, what's to say 75% fat and 25% protein isn't better for you than 80-20, or vice versa? There's no way to know. And the only way to know is to do the experiment yourself. So when people come to the chat and they ask, how much protein should I have? How much fat should I have? We can only by default give you a generic guideline based on our experience. And that won't apply to everyone. So when, you can't then come to us and say, oh, that much protein didn't work. I ended up constipated. Well, why was that? Did you have a lack of bile acid to break down fat? Was it that the fat was too high, but the protein was right, but therefore it detracted from your ability to digest protein properly? There's no way to know. So that's what my ebook sort of goes into, which I'm hoping people actually take a good look at. Yeah, that's kind of my take on it. And like I said, it's all experimental. There's no absolutes. My ratio of protein to fat is something like, I can't even say, probably, I don't know. I'm probably, if you looked at calories, probably 45-50% protein a lot of the time, and the rest is coming from mostly fat, maybe like 2-3% carbs through dairy, maybe a bit of eggs, something like that. Now you might look at that and think, oh, 50-50 roughly, is that right? Well, apparently, yeah, because I can still go to the gym, still train really hard. I'm not dead. I don't have, my liver's not falling out my backside, and I'm getting the results I need. So these numbers are arbitrary. They're not rock solid. And I think I actually agree with what Bart K said in a recent video. I can't remember if it was a view or on his own, but he said, right, anyone that starts talking about calories, forget everything else they've said, because from the get-go, they've got it wrong. From the baseline get-go, the physiology, the understanding of biochemistry is completely pants. So, yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, what's your statement? What's your thoughts, Stephen?
Well, actually, I really love what you said, actually, about just the simplicity of it. Today, I've had 4 eggs and I've had a glass of milk. I think that's pretty bang on, because that's how we live, isn't it? I don't see my dog getting an app out to work out what he needs to eat. He looks at it, he eats what he needs, and he stops when he doesn't need to eat anymore. And I promise you, raw carnivore dogs do not do what other dogs do. They don't nick all their food down as much as they can. They do actually seem to moderate properly. But yeah, I know. I've never heard you say that actually as blunt as that, and I think that's brilliant. I would say we are so influenced by the size of a plate, and we can get hung up on how much that steak weighs. But to be honest, I know how much I need, because I keep eating every day. And I think, right, well, yesterday I had a steak and I had maybe some sausage meat, let's just say. And afterwards, I can remember I didn't really feel as full as I could have done. So I'll have a steak and I'll have a couple of eggs. Right. I'm not saying that happened yesterday, but I'm just using that as an example. And as you do this every single day, you get to be able to eyeball exactly what you need, and you can look at your results. And if you feel hungry after you've eaten, you've not eaten enough. I think we just need to go back to all of that. And I really love that, Jonathan. I might start saying that myself, just right. In fact, when I do a mood and food diary with people, I use WhatsApp and they just send pictures. So I get a rough idea of the portion size, and they just send me that. and tell me how they feel and how they feel 2 hours later. And when they eat the next time, they send me the next meal. I've never asked them to weigh it ever. And then I just say, you know, at the end of the week, how you feeling? And I get them to write things like, my jeans are a bit looser. That's it. There's not a number in a mood and I've never realized that I'm doing what you sort of do, but with pictures. It's so simple, isn't it? Yeah, great. Good. That's why you're on here, though, because I like that new voice, that different way of talking. It's good.
Yeah.
And
I like to keep it simple. I like to keep it simple. I try to avoid the jargon. You know, people that watch these videos, as smart as they are, it doesn't help to sort of start throwing biochemistry across it and that they don't know. You know, they want to know what should I eat and how should I work it out without really going into details too much.
Do you know what? I will share this story. I did a conference, and I'm not going to mention which one, but I'd been there 3 days, and one of the participants, one of not the speakers, but one of the guests there, came up to me and said, "I've been here 3 days, and I still don't know how much protein to eat." Like, right, okay, I will tell you. And I did exactly what you just said. I just said, right, okay, what are you eating, and how are you feeling afterwards? Oh, well, I'm having 4. They didn't go, I'm having 200 grams of eggs. They said, I'm having 4 eggs in a scrambled egg, and I'm having a couple of slices or rashers of bacon. Right, okay. And how do you feel after that? Well, I feel like I could eat that again. I'm saying, well, what do you think the answer is then? So I think that's great. Right. So let's get into Alan and his wife. Is what that stands for, by the way, Carnivore. My wife and I do full body split at the gym 3 times a week, 2 sets of 10 reps, and the second set to failure sometimes. We are beginners at the gym. Is this a good regime for strength training? Hand it over to you, Jonathan.
Yeah, I like the idea of full body splits. I think where people go wrong is they assume they've got so much pedigree and perfection in their physique already. They just want to get that little bit more bicep growth. The reality is, guys, you're going to have your strengths and weaknesses by your genetic defaults anyway. For me, my strengths are, in terms of body physique, I've got big calves, big biceps. My traps grow very, very easily, so I don't train them at all. But I train calves and biceps, but I train them a lot less. But only because I use that as a way to facilitate more recovery capacity and resources to be directed towards my weaker body parts. But I'm only going to know that after a certain point where I've been doing it for so long that I can clearly identify, okay, this is behind, this is ahead. But the average person who's just starting out, or I'd say even up to the first maybe 3-4 years, should really be doing something like a full body or some sort of very similar split to that. Now, the idea of doing 1 set versus 2 sets versus 3 sets, I like to look at it from the point of view of a total volume per week kind of standpoint. So what someone might do is they might, in this example, do 10 total sets per session, 3 times per week, and that'll be 2 sets for chest, 2 sets for quads, 2 sets for hamstrings, 2 for lats, whatever it happens to be, And you might say, oh, by the end of this week, I've got a lot of soreness in this body part, but not much soreness in this body part. You might then be able to identify over time, well, maybe I don't need 2 sets for my biceps if they're massive already. Okay, we'll drop off that 2 sets for your biceps, add on 1 of those sets to a weaker body part. But then what you find in the literature is 1 set versus 2 sets versus 3 sets. It's quite a contentious topic. What you find is you'll get probably maybe 80-90% of the results from 1 set. The second set gives you maybe a bit more, and the third set might give you a few percentage more points than that. But if you know that you're doing each set and training hard to failure, you only really need about 1 set per exercise. In that sort of standpoint, I actually prefer people to split the exercise choice up even more. So, for example, if you know that your chest is underdeveloped, you might say, well, I'm doing 2 sets per week or 2 sets 3 times per week, but my elbows are sore every time. Well, maybe the way you're lifting is more elbow dominant. Maybe you're using your triceps more. So maybe you might actually be better off switching that 2 sets, but using perhaps 1 set of a chest fly exercise, than one set of a chest press exercise. Therefore, you're taking the strain off your elbows. You're going to give yourself more capacity to recover over time because you're facilitating and allowing those resources to be used more appropriately. So I think the idea of a generic sort of 2x2x2 plan isn't always optimal. You might find if you've got an injury, for example, another little example, I can't, for example, do a lot of, or much of any sort of bent over movements. So sort of any rowing movements are quite bad for my back, and essentially. But what I might find that I'm able to do is I might be able to isolate with a more simple, or more sort of simple movement, then move on to a complex movement afterwards, which has more muscle groups involved. Therefore, by default, I'm lowering the amount of weight that I need to use, but I'm still giving the body the same stimulus. I mean, the body is not able to identify whether you're doing a squat or a leg press. And typically, an example of that is when I'm on stage nowadays when I compete, I typically have the best legs on stage despite having a spine disease that's rough. That's not because I'm anything of an anomaly of my legs. It's just because I found a way to train my legs better than a lot of the other people that I'm competing against. So that might mean that I'm doing a pre-exhaustion movement. So I'm isolating an exercise, a body part with an exercise prior to doing a compound movement, which allows me to still train to a high degree, but not give my body the same wear and tear. So I'd start looking after a certain point, like, you know, changing around the exercises. Perhaps you need more variety. And when I say variety, I mean just so you're not getting the strain on certain body parts over time. You're still able to sort of adapt and give your body a different level of stimulus. One like final point, just so I know it's such a long topic, and that's why, I mean, I don't want to go into it too much. I could be here for about 6 hours straight talking about just sets alone. But one way that I like to do when I'm sort of constructing a training plan is I actually prefer to use time under tension as my metric. And the reason is you cannot standardize what 10 reps is unless you know exactly how many seconds it requires. So, for example, 10 sets or 10 reps of a squat, your first set, you might be really controlled, slow, you know, good range of motion, deep at the bottom of the hole. But then you might find the second set, it might take half as long because you're trying to rush through the movement. So, you know, 10 reps versus 60 seconds. You know, 60 seconds is always going to be 60 seconds because we can standardize that amount of volume. And one sort of thing also to note is when you're doing a set, you kind of want to identify the gripping point or the sticking point, you might say. So if you know, for example, it takes you 5 seconds up and 5 seconds down to do a rep, when that set gets to the point where it starts to take maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds up, you know that you're close to failure. Your proximity to technical muscular failure is a lot closer. But if your last rep is still 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down, you've not hit anything close to failure. It's like kicking a football against a wall and saying, oh, I've done enough kicking the football against the wall now because I've done it 10 times. But you need to sort of identify the right metrics. Again, it's like the calories thing. The idea of reps nowadays, although it's a measurement, it's not the best measurement. So I typically prescribe anything for most people between 60 and 120 seconds per set. And obviously a muscle fiber type set point or your sort of disposition will impact that somewhat. And it might be that, okay, your knees are bad, you've got bad joints. Maybe you're not going to do a 60-second set, maybe you're going to do a 120-second set. But the most important thing is to get close to that failure point. So whether that takes you 60 seconds or 120 seconds, doesn't really matter. Your body's just going to notice, oh, I can't lift this anymore. That was hard. Then it's going to create that adaptive response. So hopefully I've covered enough ground there to sort of answer the question. But have you got a different any sort of different ideas, Stephen, at all?
No, I think that's a very full and just a great answer. So I think we'll go on to the next question, which I think is interesting. Carnivorous savagery. Thoughts on grounding, please. Woo woo or a real thing? Thanks. Now, I always like to flip these things to get people thinking differently. If I was to suddenly recommend to a human being, whatever you do, do not let your bare feet touch anything to do with the earth. In fact, what you should do is insulate your feet so much so they can't sweat, it can't touch the grass. And in fact, I would thoroughly recommend wearing socks and quite heavy shoes, and shoes that don't actually go with how your foot moves. Does that sound pretty woo-woo? Does that sound pretty stupid? I mean, this is the thing.
No.
I like to look at plausibility. Hands are amazing. They're so dexterous and they can really do great stuff. So anything that you wrap them in, or that's going to be beneficial. So I would say that it's very plausible that there are benefits, because we evolved barefoot. We definitely had contact with the earth. Definitely, electrical properties of the earth are known, well established. We know it's negative charge. We know that we can get electron transfer. It's plausible that it can go through the skin. But I'm also big enough and strong enough to admit it could be the scenario itself. It could be the fact that you are not wearing shoes and you are moving your body, and the proprioception is better for your feet, and you're outside. You can't really ground effectively. I mean, you can get grounding mats. I know you are outside. The fact that you get people at ground tend to do early morning sunshine as well, and tend to try and get into their circadian rhythms. So I think it's a real thing, but I think it's hard to prove, because you have automatically, because you are doing something outside and barefoot and in nature, you have these other things that come with it. You can't say to someone, let's ground, but not put you outside. It's really difficult. You can't really do it. So I would say it's not woo-woo, and I would also say it's difficult to prove it's a real thing. But people that do it do tend to feel a lot better. And that, to me, makes a lot of sense. What do you think?
I'm happy with that answer. I mean, I'm on a grounding sheet the majority of my day. I do notice, I mean, there's a lot of sort of extraneous variables, but whenever I sleep somewhere else, I'm at a hotel, I'm speaking at a conference, I'm at my brother's house, whatever it is, I do tend to notice I don't quite sleep as well. So, yeah, I mean, I'm happy with your answer. I think it's a very cheap investment for something which could give a very good yield, in my opinion.
Yes, yeah, and that's it. I mean, it's free. What are you going to lose? If I told you, I think it's really good to do what I do: get out in the morning when the sun's coming up, go to the gym, try and when you get to the car, walk across the grass to the gym barefoot, and look at the stars. If it's still, the sun hasn't come up yet, that sounds pretty good to me. Right. Here's a nice, interesting question from Phil. Phil's a big supporter. We haven't got long, so it might not be a satisfactory answer, Phil. And there are other people with questions. How long have you got, Jonathan?
I'm happy to stay on for a good half an hour extra if you want. It's up to you.
Okay. Well, let's see how we go, because I've
up to you completely.
Yeah, it's been a difficult day here. We haven't had water, and Rupert's back from the vets today, had his bandage off. So Jane's on vigilant duty, stopping him from licking his tail, and I think it's a bit unfair to not take over. Yeah. But let's see. Anyway, so Phil was saying, Phil, thank you again for your support. Can you speak to hypoglycemia on the standard American diet, standard Western diet? Aunt is diagnosed in her early 20s, is lately getting shaky in the evenings before a meal. She's in her mid-70s now. How can low-carb, keto, or carnivore help? I mean, the short answer is that diagnosis very early, I am assuming, is not from the way we're eating now, but you're saying she's on the standard American diet. So that is the hypoglycemia, and I know it sounds really weird, is probably the blood sugar roller coaster, where I always talk about people where it's 150 and then it's 50, 150, then it's 50. And, you're getting all these blood glucose spikes, and you're getting a lot of insulin coming down. So the body is now doing this. It's trained to drop its blood glucose quite rapidly. That's what insulin's job is, to stop it being toxic, and it does tend to overshoot because we're eating all the wrong things. So you then get that hypoglycemic stress response. So the first thing that the diet would do is stabilize the blood glucose. So instead of this 150, 50, 150, 50, we would have 105, 95, 105, 95. And once she's adapted, if you have no roller coaster, you don't have a crash. If you don't have a high, you won't have a low. That's the way it works. So it's just more constant. Obviously, if she's getting shaky before the meal, also look at meal timing. But if you take her off the diet and make sure that she's, eating enough, then I think within 3 to 4 weeks of that, then those problems would stop, to be honest. The standard American diet is going to deplete you of so many things. And I think you're messing up with your circadian rhythm as well, because if you're starting with a big bowl of oats or something with a sliced up banana, you're cutting off the natural, I hate the word spike for cortisol, but the elevation of cortisol, elevation, not in a bad way. It needs to be higher in the morning than it does in the evening. So I think it would really help, but I'm sure, Jonathan, did you want to add to that?
I've got nothing to add, honestly. To be completely frank, you're the person I'd go to for this kind of answer, where I'd get my references from. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you. But I think the thing is, Jonathan, I mean, this is the good thing when you have people with different skills on, you absorb those sort of almost by osmosis. And I think this one's for you. Because I've really not taken creatine in any big way, but I'm sure you have either clients that have done this or done it yourself. So let's do the question. Christine, I'm taking 5 grams of creatine with a glass of milk and have cramps the next morning. It tastes great and feels good in the moment. The taste of creatine is hard to dissolve. Any input?
Yeah, I mean, if it's creatine monohydrate, it should be quite bland in taste. If anything, it most resembles sand, like with a very, in terms of like texture as well. It's very dull, I guess. One thing you can try out is micronized creatine. If you don't like the texture of it, that will dissolve a lot better in things like water and that. Some people have very sensitive guts. They might actually benefit from splitting up that 5 grams of creatine between 2 or 3, maybe even 4 sittings. So throughout the day, I'd suggest when you do have it though, try to have it. Timing in of itself doesn't matter because it's just I guess kind of like a viable substrate for the body to use during high-end, intense bouts of exercise activity. That's what it's for, really. But I'd just split it up throughout the day. So maybe a gram or 2 in your coffee in the morning, whatever. A gram or 2 in the midday, something like that. And in regards to like the cramping, some people can have like a stomach upset from it. So you might actually lose electrolytes via the stomach upset element of it. And the other thing as well is basically one of the things it does is it shoves a bit more water into the muscle cells. And by default, more water means more salt will follow and vice versa. So it might be that your requirements of certain electrolytes might actually go up a little bit. It's kind of a bit more like a bit more of a Richard kind of question, but that's what I'd probably do. I just split up the servings a bit, try out creatine monohydrate is micronized, and look at your electrolytes as well. So try actually tapering up your salt throughout the day as well with each meal. That's what I would personally do.
Brilliant. The feral grandmother is giving somebody, one of us, a $10, which is great, as a super chat. Thanks, gentlemen. It's been a good one, which is excellent.
Oh, thanks very much.
I think, yeah. Do you know if that's your channel or my channel, Jonathan? I could never tell.
Well, what I find is on the StreamYard back office end that we're looking at, the one with the paperclip is the one that's on our channel. If that makes sense. So I think it's for you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Okay.
If it's for me, though, thank you very much.
Yes. So I just want to point out that we do need to keep saying to subscribe and like and comment because it just helps us get out there. So I am going to wrap up because I think I've got to do Rupert duty and stop him licking his tail. We've got a lovely bit of iodine to put on every so often, especially if he licks it, apparently. But we're being vigilant and not letting that happen. It's only going to be 3 days, and one of us is going to watch over him at night, and I think that's going to be me, and I absolutely don't mind doing that because it's really good. So anyway, right, Jonathan, thank you so much for being on. I don't know if you want to do this on a regular basis. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Stephen, I benefit a lot from this. I find it enjoyable, keeps me mentally sane. The questions are quite stimulating. It gets me ticking over, thinking still, and I benefit from your learned experience as well. So I'm grateful to be here, and I'd love to do these frequently, as much as you want. Maybe every week or every 2 weeks, we can host one of these semi-regular sort of time. So,
okay, mate. Yeah. Well, that's what we'll do. And I'm going to end the stream now. If you wonder why there's a gap, if you're watching on YouTube, it's because there is. When I press end stream, right, I'm going to actually tell you when I press end stream, and we're going to see how long we're standing here like lemons or sitting here like lemons. Are you ready? So I'm going to press end stream.
Like this,
Thank you. Yeah, we could do police squad. I might do that. Right, here we go. So I'm going to press it now. Oh no, hang on, because they give you a second button. Hang on. Now.